Assassin's Creed Shadows, I'm sure, is going to be a game that is a center of debate around things like the culture war and around things like diversity and inclusion and why it's good or why it's bad or why it's forced or why it's not. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of business things behind this game and behind Ubisoft that are kind of flying under the radar for people. At the lowest amount, they're a little bit worrying. And at, I would say, the height of what it could be just a very disturbing start to business practices that are not good for game ownership, for you being able to enjoy a game you purchase when you want, how you want. Ubisoft is one of the biggest companies in the games industry. Now, people can meme on them. People can say, I haven't bought an Assassin's Creed since 1812. And you can do that and you can say whatever you want. This is a game that is selling. It's worth noting for pre-orders and sales for Amazon, it was #1 in Japan 2 days ago as of recording this. So a lot of people are getting offended for Japanese people. They're saying stuff like, well, Yasuke shouldn't be the one who's playable here. He shouldn't be in this game. You know, why a black samurai? Well, they could have picked an Asian person. They could have picked a Japanese person. But what they're not, realizing is that Japan, by and large, doesn't care. Yes, there are like massive amounts of downvotes on the Japanese trailer. Yes, there are obviously people who are saying that Japan cares. There are people from Japan who do care. But this was #1 in Japan, #1 in the UK, #1 in Germany, #2 in France, and #6 in the US, which we'll touch on in a minute here because I think that is interesting with the US in terms of sales for Amazon's bestsellers list as of a couple of days ago, I believe on May 20th. And I'll include the links to some of this stuff down below. Now, the reason why that's worrying to me, someone who does want to play this game, but I didn't pre-order it, the reason why that's worrying to me is because of Ubisoft. Ubisoft is such a big company that when they are successful, people do look at that, they look to it, and they try and emulate it. That's what all these big players do. They look to what the other ones are doing, and they say, how do we get a piece of that pie? Now, it's worth noting Ubisoft is the company whose CEO commented on Skull and Bones' $70 price. Now, remember, Skull and Bones was a pretty barren game, not a lot to do, especially in its beta where it was really criticized, and said that it was a quadruple A game. That's what their CEO said, defending that price. Ubisoft is also the same company where I believe his name was Philippe Tremblay, who was representing Ubisoft in this interview, talking about Ubisoft Plus and some other things with GamesIndustry.biz, said that gamers need to get used to not owning their games. Basically saying that, we're looking at customer behavior, how they interact with our stuff. I made a whole video about this with Ubisoft, and they looked at all these different things, and they were saying that the company has had millions of subscribers over the last 4 years with their service, and they're saying essentially that what they need to do is get players used to not buying games, getting them used to essentially joining this kind of membership to play games, like how they're used to it with Netflix, even citing things like how gamers and just, I guess I would say people in general, got used to not owning CDs anymore, got used to not buying movies. Now, as someone who still buys the occasional CD and does buy a movie if I really like that movie, I'm frustrated with this model because, as I've talked about it before, even if the EULA or the law or any of these things say that you don't own a game that you purchase, when you buy a disc, you have that disc in your house on your shelf, and no one can take it from you. No one is able to actually come in and say, actually, I'm going to take that, unless they're robbing you, in which case it's against the law. When it comes down to it, there are a lot of ways to skirt around the law everywhere. European Union people always say, well, here we have consumer protections. Yes, you do. But the problem is with a lot of these games, especially ones that might require online or require you to have an account, there are ways to ban that account. There are ways to find some ridiculous breach of the terms of service that you did to still remove your access to something, depending on if it requires internet. Now, Assassin's Creed isn't quite at that point yet, but it is getting there more and more with every single title, as we are working our way towards the launch of AC Infinity, which we've talked about in the past, which is expected to coincide with the launch of Assassin's Creed Shadows. That's a live service platform, which is essentially going to have the modern day storyline of Assassin's Creed on it from now on, and it's going to essentially be like the Call of Duty launcher. where you can kind of hop into it and go to different games or go to different experiences. They even talked about it in the past, kind of implying that there might be some stuff, for all we know, that's only going to be on AC Infinity. Now, Assassin's Creed Shadows plays into all of this because while this game does not need an internet connection to run, you do need an internet connection to be able to install the game, whether you buy a physical disc or you buy it digitally. Now, if you buy it digitally, it doesn't matter. I mean, like, that doesn't matter, that requirement, because it's not like you buy it digitally and then you go to the store like the old days, you know, where you could put in your Game Boy Advance cartridge and download a Pokemon or something from GameStop. It's not like that. This is straight up the way to buy a game digitally is obviously it's going to be downloaded from the internet. So for people who have already thrown out physical and don't care about ownership of their stuff, because that's kind of the message you're sending to companies if you go exclusively that way, despite me understanding that unfortunately there are some countries where that is the best way to play games because of taxes and other fees. When you do that, obviously it doesn't matter with the internet connection because you've already basically said I'm okay with that. But when it comes down to it with physical discs, the good thing with these that I've talked about again and again is that you own a 1.0 disc of that game. Like you own build 1.0 of whatever that game is. Now, maybe sometimes that's not the best build. Maybe sometimes there's DLC, maybe sometimes there's patches, all kinds of other stuff, of course. Now, there's going to be examples like Cyberpunk, where that start-to-finish 1.0 build kind of sucks, but it's a game that can be played from start to finish. With this game, however, no matter what, you're going to need an internet connection to be able to install the game. Essentially, with a lot of players citing that it's probably because of the game's size. Either way, in the past, I know a lot of people aren't going to remember this, what they did when games were too big was they gave you more than one disc. Final Fantasy VII Remake, Rebirth, these are games that still do things like this, so it obviously is doable. It's just that Ubisoft doesn't care to do it. Now, the problem that I have with all of this is that Assassin's Creed is moving more and more towards an online infrastructure where every game, it seems like it's a little bit more in that direction, where to have the complete experience, you need that. This one doesn't require internet to play, but because it requires it to install, and we are now pushing towards AC Infinity, to me that's a worry. Now, people in Japan, people in obviously the UK and Germany and France, they've all basically voted with their wallet already that they're okay with those business practices. They don't care. Now, in the US, some people are going to say, well, the US, maybe they're not okay with it. It's number 6. This comes more down to DEI stuff, like the diversity, whatever, inclusion stuff. Essentially, the idea that Americans have had political, racial theories and economic theories and like all these things shoved in their faces for so long in media that unfortunately it's something where I would argue, this can be slightly political, if you're leaning on the left, you're probably just going to automatically blindly defend that thing because you see a black person or an Asian person or a woman or something. And on the right, it seems like you're just going to automatically condemn it and be like, this is forced diversity. A lot of countries don't have that kind of baggage behind them. Like, they don't give a shit. They don't care. They haven't really experienced the same level of like always in your face, power dynamics and all these political ideologies and things that are debated and probably will be for years and years. The American people are very split on that stuff. So when it comes down to it, obviously the American audience is way behind these other countries for pre-ordering because I'm sure that with all of this controversy and even with it coming out that it seemed like there were people making Japanese Twitter accounts and basically different Japanese accounts to criticize the game and Yasuke being in here and stuff. Like a lot of people in America are already frustrated, and I understand why that country is not as on board with this game, because personally, when it comes to Yasuke, I don't really care. You know, I know that they're stretching the history in this game, and I don't care at all. It's very debated with a lot of people if Yasuke was actually a samurai or not. A lot of people cite Retainer to say he wasn't a samurai. That said, Retainer was a type of samurai anyway. But that doesn't mean he was a samurai who saw combat. Then again, does a samurai have to see combat to be a real samurai? These are going to be a lot of debates. And to me, I've noticed it's mainly white people arguing with each other in America about that. That's why for me, That's not the biggest problem around Assassin's Creed. Now, people can have their opinions on it. People can absolutely say, hey, I would have preferred that they had a straight up, Japanese male samurai because I feel like that would have fit the time period better. And I wish that you had interacted with Yasuke off on the side as a character like Machiavelli in Rome, or like, for example, Leonardo da Vinci in Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood. I think that those are fair comments. And I'm also unfortunately seeing a lot of really, really bad, legitimate racism behind it. Like people saying, oh, look, and putting pictures of, and I'm not kidding, I can show you some, people putting pictures of like George Floyd in a samurai helmet, people putting pictures of like a monkey in a samurai helmet and saying, oh, this is what they're doing, this is what this person was. And essentially animalizing and dehumanizing that person who did exist in history, regardless of what role they played, as, well, less than human because they're upset that this game has a black person in it. That's different than having a debate about the historical accuracy of that character. Although I will also say this is a game where pretty much every main character so far has been made up, and you also hunt fictional science fiction objects from a group of godlike precursor beings, the Isu, who passed down things like eagle vision through the blood of humans by interbreeding with them. This has never been a historically accurate franchise, but its worlds have felt mostly believable, right? So people are going to have that debate. My problem is that debate is steeped in a lot of racism as well, and on top of that, the people who aren't being racist, who are debating it, I also believe are a little bit missing what Ubisoft is doing behind the scenes with all of their business practices, with their push towards always online, with their push towards you not owning things, with their push towards the ever-creeping prices of these games. Like, if you look at this game, the standard edition is $70, but there's even a pre-order bonus day one, which is very common for them. But then you also have things like the $110 gold edition, where you get 3 days early access, which is going to lead to tons of spoilers online, by the way, if you care about this game at all, and you don't want to pay $110. So you have to pay at least $110 to not have this game spoiled for you, unless you're just not going to go on the internet. That's genuinely what that is. Then you have the Ultimate Edition, which is $130, which adds an Ultimate Pack, and obviously there's a Season Pass in both of those previous two editions. Then you also have the ability to pay $17.99 to play day one on Ubisoft Plus, which is essentially like Game Pass, where you get a game right away. And then you have the 3 days early access as well as 100 PC games access through that platform. But then it doesn't stop there. Like, you might think $130 is an expensive version of a game. Well, no. You haven't seen the Assassin's Creed Shadows Collector's Edition. What bums me out about this is I love gaming statues, like little figures and stuff. I love that stuff. I couldn't really care too much less or more about the rest of the stuff in that. But I really thought, oh, wow, this is cool. I think Yasuke is cool. I think, obviously, that Naui, I believe is her name, is cool, the female shinobi. I think she's cool. She's probably the one I'll play as more. But I thought that these two characters were fun. I thought that they looked really neat, and I thought that this world looked cool. But now, if I wanted to get this collector's edition, you know what it is? It's over $200. This is a game that is literally over $200 for its collector's edition. It's about, I believe, $280. So by the time you're done paying tax, at least in the US, that is a $300 collector's edition for one game. And for me, all I really want is the statue. $300 to get Assassin's Creed Shadows and to get a disc that doesn't even work without the internet because you have to install it using that because I'm sure the whole game isn't on there, which basically makes the disc a coaster. This is very frustrating to watch these business practices and to watch everybody debate like Yasuke and to debate this character in this game and to not actually look at what's happening, to not actually look at how much these things continue to creep up in price. Even with people trying to scalp this the pre-order of this, I would say collector's edition for like $400 on eBay and stuff, which, I don't know. Those people are just losers who do that. But anyways, I still think it's really frustrating because like this is already highly pre-ordered, highly sought after. We've seen no gameplay yet. This is from someone who, by the way, I think the game sounds really cool from everything they've described, and I loved the CGI trailer. I like these games. I've liked every Assassin's Creed game. I don't care if that makes me a shill or not. I have my criticisms. I've liked all of them. But for me, when I'm seeing all of these things build and I'm seeing like an actual racism behind the debate of Yasuke, and then I'm seeing other people who, even if they're not, even if it's just a legitimate like, hey, this is what I would have preferred, which is fair. I don't care. That's fine. You can have that opinion. I'll say that 50 times, but somebody in the comments will still say, Jay said everyone who doesn't want Yasuke is racist. That's not what I'm saying at all. So listen, my problem is that even if you're debating that in good faith, 100% good faith, that is still missing the point of what Ubisoft is doing behind the scenes. They're pushing more and more towards bad business practices, and it bums me out because there is a lot of talented, really cool, really awesome, and dedicated video game developers, not the company, the devs themselves at Ubisoft, who care about the Assassin's Creed franchise just like a lot of fans do. And unfortunately, as Ubisoft steeps themselves more and more in these frustrating business practices that continue to raise prices and lower your ability to own really anything, they continue to get rewarded for it ahead of time. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't want to play the game. This doesn't mean that I don't want the game. But I do think that when people are pre-ordering it before we've seen anything about it at all, you're telling Ubisoft you don't give a shit what they do at all. You don't care if you own the game. You don't care if they charge $500 for the game. You don't care if the $70 version you get requires internet to install. You don't care if the $70 version you get doesn't require all, or doesn't have all of the content. The fact that they're already creating season pass content right now, essentially, and they've planned it all out, and we haven't even seen gameplay yet. Like, they used to do DLC, used to add on to complete games. And now it feels like you need to buy all of that DLC, all of that content, and the most expensive version of whatever the game is just to get the full game. And on top of that, you're now being basically put in a position where if you're a huge fan of this game, you have to pay blood money in order to not have it spoiled 3 days ahead of time by a bunch of people who are going to get it early. This is very frustrating for me to see. I like this franchise a lot. I really do. I care about its world. I enjoy its characters. I loved Mirage. And at the end of the day, I'm not saying how you can or can't spend your money. Like, I'm not going to show up at your house, like kidnap you, throw you in the back of a van because you bought this game. My point is that every dollar spent on something sends a message to a company. Some of these companies are too stupid to understand what that message is, but it is true that it does endorse or decry behavior, choices, business practices far more than a complaint, far more than a downvote on a video, far more than any of that ever will. I'm not saying that isn't something you can do as well. I'm just saying that the money is what talks to these companies. And as Ubisoft pushes in this direction, they're seeing that the money is flowing in the direction they are going, and nobody cares what direction they're taking it. And that's something that I think people should be a little concerned about. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content. I do appreciate hearing from you on stuff like this. I do want your opinion on stuff, and I don't want people to walk away from this. And I know anyone who wanted to hear this won't have listened to this point anyway. So if you did, you can always call it out in the comments and say, hey, that's not what he said if you want. I appreciate that. Please try and be nice. But I know some people who wanted to hear that someone was saying, hey, anyone who doesn't like Yasuke is racist. They'll have heard me say that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you can't have that debate. I'm not saying you can't talk about it. It's fair. It's fair game. This is media in the world. You can talk about it. You can criticize it. You can debate it. Fine. But there's a lot of people doing so in bad faith, and there's a lot of people doing so in good faith who are also being roped into a discussion that I think should take back seat to these business practices, because people are letting Ubisoft do a lot of stuff that probably isn't good for the video game space. So if you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe. I appreciate you very much. I hope you have a fantastic day. I look forward to hearing from you more. If you like these games, I do have a whole playlist where I cover them on this channel. I also do have as well another channel, Degenerate Plays, where I've been playing through these games, played through Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood. Near future, I'm going to start Assassin's Creed 1. I do also as well have, of course, our channel Magical Jill, where we've been doing stuff with anime, and we do as well have another channel, which is JayRPG, where I cover role-playing games. So, hope to see you on one of those. Have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shui.